Hey, we are live. Hey, good Lord, there's a fog in my throat just when I said that. Sorry. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning to the BAMF podcast. I am your host, Mike Lafferty. Today, we're talking about the end of days, the apocalypse, and the movies that are the best and worst examples of it. And we have a big-ass panel to talk about this depressing subject today. Directly to my right in the grid is Jacob Blackman. Hey, Jacob.
Doom on you.
Directly past Jacob on the right is Owen K.C. Stevens of, hey, how you doing, Owen? Eating crackers?
Hi,
That's
folks.
okay. We'll come back to that. It's all right. Directly below me, and the only unbearded member of our panel today is Walt Rebelliard. Hey, Walt.
Straight out of Vault 76.
All right, cool. Nice reference. And over here, we have Craig Campbell of Nerdburger. Craig, how you doing, nerd?
Pretty good. You maniacs! You maniacs!
Nice. And last but not least, in the far right corner, we have Christopher McLaughlin of Ghost Show Press. How you doing, sir?
You know, right when I was in college, I lived next to a convenience store, and I was once woken up at 8 in the morning by somebody jumping out of their car yelling, "I'm going to hell, but first I'm getting some cigarettes!" And that's kind of the spirit I want to bring to today's show.
I think there's smoking in hell, so it probably works out. So we're talking about best and worst post-apocalyptic movies. And let me start the tone off with the Road Warrior trailer from 1981. Do we want to watch the whole thing or just the first few seconds get the flavor? What do you guys think?
Just a flavor.
All right, cool. Just say when, and let me make sure I share audio this time because, you know, sometimes I forget to. Chrome tab, Road Warrior 1981, share audio.
Yeah, that's some inside baseball.
Sorry. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah.
Dune buggies.
Here it is. Greetings from the Humongous.
In a world without gas.
The Humongous rules the wasteland.
I'm gravely disappointed that you wish to take the gasoline out of the wasteland.
We'll never walk away.
Give me the pump, the gasoline.
I'm waiting for Mel Gibson to show up.
And he was there a few minutes ago.
Oh, is
He was crouched in a corner for 4 seconds.
So
All right, that's probably-
gasoline.
Was that
Probably
the
enough
first,
of them.
is that the first movie trailer ever that actually opens with the words, "in a world"?
It
might have
might
been.
be. I mean, it's a first in a lot of ways, right? It's the second Mad Max movie, but the first Mad Max movie isn't really post-apocalyptic. It's peri-apocalyptic. It's things are going to heck in a handbasket as the
It's
movie
Australia.
is
It's hard
forward.
to tell.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the theme of Mad Max is about the breakdown of social society, not about social society having totally already gone away. So it was sort of the first movie I'm aware of that radically changed genres. It radically changed visuals. It's the first one that proved that in the apocalypse, it's going to be the S&M crowd and the sports reject crowd who are going to rule the wastelands. It was the first one that put a whole bunch of spikes on cars, and wow, did they have a lot of cars for
Oh, my friend, you missed the cars that ate Paris. I take it.
I did.
Spiky Volkswagens.
Okay, I am willing to sit corrected.
I've
For that
never heard.
matter-
Are you making some of this stuff up, Chris? Because I never know. Because you always have these obscure movie references, and I can't tell if it's just like
You can check Phil Hardy's seminal Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. There is a quarter-page spread of the spiky Volkswagen. It's one of the more vivid images in a 1,000-page book.
Okay. Well, I have a copy of that holding up my table right now. So once the podcast is done, I will make sure I
You
check
can
it
hold
out.
up your car with those Phil Hardy guidebooks. You
And
can
to be
get
clear,
4 of them and change your oil.
to be clear, I'm talking about hard welding or duct taping spikes on things, right? Because Death Race 2000 comes before the Road Warrior as far as cars with spikes of any kind on them, but those are more professionally applied spikes than sort of post-apocalyptic.
Oh, we have 2 different categories for professional and amateur. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
No, I think once you're in the apocalypse, you can be a professional if you just barter for your services, right? If you give me a sheep for doing that welding, then I'm a professional welder. Doesn't matter what quality the job is. So,
Well,
and
if it's not a good quality job, you don't get the sheep.
Fair enough.
Or you can trade gasoline, as the guy said.
Speaking of gasoline, do you guys know that oil is down to like $1 a barrel?
Actually, last I checked, it was actually negative.
Yeah, it was
Futures are negative. Yeah.
They are.
I put my order in with Amazon Prime, so
You order some gasoline right now, they also send you cash.
I mean, in all seriousness, they don't have any place to store it. So for futures, they're having to pay people to agree to take the oil.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I mean, I have never seen an RPG except maybe Car Wars that really sort of captured the feel I would want out of a Mad Max RPG, you know, because it always seemed like RPGs are going more for either zombies or the really weird stuff like GammaFinder. Maybe I missed something though.
There's Deadlands Hell on Earth, which is a pretty solid.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Game.
Well, what about Twilight 2000?
Yeah, I mean,
That was supposed to kind of be a post-apocalyptic game.
had a lot going for it, but not much for chase scenes.
I mean, Car Wars is only barely a role-playing game, right? It's primarily a war game, and therefore it gets to focus on those car mechanics. But certainly, if you look at the Morrow Project, Twilight 2000, Aftermath, there are a fair number of RPGs from the late 80s and early 90s that focus on everything has gone to heck in a handbasket rather than focusing on, hey, you grew a third arm out of your head and you can summon psychic whales.
Yeah, you get a lot more games like Gamma Worlds and Rifts to represent Aftermath settings.
Yeah. I keep meaning to track down a copy of Year of the Phoenix.
Okay.
Yeah.
The if you're looking for something like Mad Max like, Colin Chapman, now you can get it through Gallant Knight Games, did Atomic Highway back in the day, and it was.
I remember I flipped it. It looked pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Colin did some really good work before he disappeared there in Australia. He was or New Zealand. He was doing some cool books, like Ion Guard. God, 10 years ago. I'm getting old, man. That was an Ion supplement where instead of Icon supplement where it was Green Lantern kind of homage, but they all had these big power gloves instead of rings. But well, hey, moving right along and sticking with
if we're name checking stuff, I have to have a shout out to my good and dear friend Rob Schwab Entertainment, who just brought the world Punk Apocalyptic. I haven't been able to pick up my own copy, but that's definitely in the sweet spot of what we're talking about.
Cool. So let's stick with the cheesy 70s motif now and go for the Dawn of the Dead trailer. Let's see. I've seen lots of zombies movies. This isn't one I have seen. Can anyone set us up for it while I'm sharing it out?
Well, it's the sequel to the original Night of the Living Dead. It's George Romero loose in a shopping mall after hours. And to this day, the Monroeville malls regrets letting him in.
and it opens just as the world is pretty much coming to an end. So the very first few minutes sort of are post-apocalyptic, but no one's realized it yet. And then the rest of the movie is about how does a small group survive when all of the stuff of civilization is there, but the actual social contracts aren't.
Okay, and here we go.
In 1968, George Romero brought us Night of the Living Dead. It became the classic horror film of its time.
Not that room!
Now, George Romero brings us the most intensely shocking motion picture experience for all times.
It gets up and kills.
All time.
The people it kills get up and kill. This situation must be controlled before it's too late. They are multiplying too rapidly.
Dawn of the Dead.
Meet me on the roof at 9 o'clock. Get out.
I don't believe
We're
it.
gonna get out in the chopper. We've got to survive. Somebody's got to survive.
They kill for one reason. They kill for food. They eat their victims.
Whew, okay. That's like watching CNN these days. How about that?
So yeah, and that trailer is all from the beginning. So it's like the first 10 minutes of the movie that like the bulk of the movie takes place in a shopping mall as the characters are kind of surviving and finding this safe haven. And then how everything dissolves, falls apart there. But so like you wouldn't know that it was, you would think it was kind of a different movie from at least that much of the trailer.
Which also actually might be kind of awesome if that was all I'd seen of it and I got to go see the movie. But like Road Warrior really set up a certain aesthetic, I think we can trace probably every post-apocalyptic zombie genre everything to Dawn of the Dead, that original. And if you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend it. If you have any interest in zombie movies, that is one of the classics for a reason.
Especially the classic one, not the modern remake.
The
modern remake is good, but the classic one will always be a classic.
It is a classic, but it is slow as hell.
I actually like the remake.
Second act is really slow.
I like the remake better. I think it does certain things better, but the remake would not exist without the original, which is what makes the original a classic. I don't think you have to be a better film to be a classic. You just have to be the jumping off point from which more things grew.
No, the remake is Zack Snyder, and it is pond scum as a result of that. It's the only film that like admittedly it's probably the best thing Zack ever did, but the fact that but it's like he had to run back during the credits. I'm going to include a bunch of shit in the credits to make you hate this film after all, and I'm like, oh, that's my guy. I recognize this. Yes, ruining the whole movie in the in the credit sequences. Yes. And the less said of Zack Snyder, the better.
He said while being the only person talking about Zack Snyder.
300 is not a bad movie. Having said that, how do we feel about Planet of the Apes? We want to watch that trailer real fast?
Yeah,
certainly.
Okay.
I'm curious. It's going to be a lot of the beginning of the movie, too.
Well, we can skip forward to the end. All right, give me a second while I share this bad boy out. And Craig, since this was your pick, why don't you give our viewers at home a quick setup while I'm doing technical stuff.
Oh, well, Charlton Heston ends up on a planet. And yeah, it's well, I mean, everybody knows it, right? Like everybody knows the ending. Like I'm not telling anybody.
I think it's been enough decades that spoiler alerts are not necessary.
Yeah. So the thing about Planet of the Apes is that it has such longevity too. It's seen at least 5 live act. Well, it's seen 4 live action and 1 animated series at least, and then comics and things as well. And in 1 installment at least in each of the variations, it's post-apocalyptic in some manner.
I'm going to fast forward a little bit here.
Sure.
Are caged in the prisons and stuffed in the museums. 20th Century Fox.
That was some persuasive fight choreography there.
Pierre Boule's finest novel.
And how?
Shocking. It made the horror which preceded it seem calm and gentle as a summer's night. Great many people worked long and hard to answer the question of what a civilization would be like where the evolutionary process has been embarrassing.
Wow, that's weird.
What's that?
You had the actor talking about the movie in the trailer?
Yeah, I didn't remember that scene myself.
No, that's yeah. Wow, that is bizarre. I've never seen that. I don't think I've ever seen this trailer before, but yeah, the actor actually giving you the concept, because as a lot of post-apocalyptic stories get, anything in movie and television in particular, is they're often very high concept. And so like this is the one that sets you up as like, what if apes were in charge and humans were hunted? And then we spin it all and we all know how it ends. Yeah, I mean, it spawned how many variations? There was a television series, there was an animated series, there were 5 movies in the original run. There was the Mark Wahlberg version that really never went anywhere with Tim Burton, and then there's the recent incarnation that's 3 movies now,
which is surprisingly good for.
Yeah, the recent movies are the next one.
I think the most recent movies versus the Wahlberg movies are proof that doing a remake of something is not inherently result in a terrible movie. Terrible movies result in terrible movies.
Exactly.
The Mark Wahlberg Planet of the Apes is a terrible movie that attempts to have a terrible twist at the end, because the original one has a twist that Greg has alluded to it, but we haven't said. When Charlton Heston and the asteroids land on the Planet of the Apes, they think they are on a different planet. They think they are on a planet of apes, and here evolution went differently. It is only at the end, when he has the iconic shot of the Statue of Liberty sticking at an angle up out of the sand, that he realizes that this is a post-apocalyptic world. They blew it up, you bastards. You
blew it up!
And apes took over. So they tried to do a twist in the Mark Wahlberg one, which is stupid. both the twist is stupid, the movie's stupid. But then they did the most recent remakes where they have a twist at the end of the first film, which sets up the rest of the Planet of the Apes films. But the movies are interesting and they're their own thing, and they have their own statements to make. So they're not slavish recreations of the original. They're not efforts to gotcha just because that one did. They're taking the same ideas and the same themes and making new and, in my opinion, pretty good movies out of it.
It seems like Tim Burton has a very narrow range. He does very certain kinds of things very well, and everything else he dabbles in, you're kind of like, okay, maybe we should have made something different here, Tim.
The killer about the twist at the end of the Burton Wahlberg one is that that's the twist from the book.
Yeah.
But in the book,
but poorly executed.
Yes.
And in the book, it was okay. They just did it. They did something else with the movie, the original movie, and then I think there was, I don't know if it was Burton's idea or the writer, however the Wahlberg version came together, decided they wanted to try to pay homage to the original book that has that the ape sitting on the Lincoln Memorial.
But the original book has a lot of other things going for it, including chimpanzees in space. So it's a
helicopters
creature, right?
Speaking of books, wouldn't you have loved to have seen the spit take from Pierre Boulle, the guy who wrote Bridge Over River Kwai, with this trailer touting that Monkey Planet is his best book ever?
Yeah, and it's got great just great trivia and stories about the whole thing too. If you go digging into the making of the original series, and you just learn how all the makeup and everything was done, and like there's layers of apes. Like there's the people that had the full prosthetic that could speak, and then there were people that had like much nicer masks, and then there are people that had like effectively rubber masks that they're way in the background. And then my favorite bit of trivia about that too is that at the commissary during lunch, while shooting, the apes sat in groups. The chimp sat with the chimps, the orangutans sat with the orangutans, and the gorilla sat with the gorillas. Nobody decided this; they just did it.
That's interesting.
So every lunchtime, it was like, oh, here's your little cluster of gorillas that are all in their military style outfits, and they're all having lunch together in their in their full makeup, having to eat through the prosthetic. And
I just continue to find Planet of the Apes amusing in the fact that what ape groups they chose to be what particular types of people in society, considering chimpanzees are really, really violent, whereas gorillas are not. And yet those are completely opposite in the Planet of the Apes society.
Yeah, and it's our perception of them. Gorillas are big and scary, and chimpanzees are like, oh, you can have a chimpanzee as a pet, and until it eats your face.
Those are growing out of those are growing out of the killer ape trope of King Kong and the cheetah pet trope of Tarzan, both of which are horribly not based in reality, but they had a strong impression on societal impact.
Sure.
I almost feel like we should mention Tiger King at this point, but instead I'll play the trailer for Steel Dawn.
Thank you.
In the far distant post-apocalyptic future, a breed of warriors roam the wastelands.
Is that Chris Christopherson?
Facing danger and placing their lives at risk.
No, it's Patrick Swayze.
They fight to establish
What?
a new order.
Yeah, Patrick Swayze is the bounty hunter in this.
A new
Jesus.
life can begin. Patrick Swayze, star of Dirty Dancing, returns to the screen in Steel Dawn.
Patrick Swayze, star of Dirty Dancing.
The search for justice has begun.
Rest with me, nobody gets hurt.
Yes.
Turn me down. A lot of people get hurt.
Never get away.
I attract violence.
Sweet dance move.
It's me. I attract violence the way I attract women.
Right.
Stop.
Look at my hair.
My floofy 80s hair.
Wow. All right, Walt. You got to explain this one since this was your pick.
It's basically an Old West bounty hunter flick set in the apocalypse. I mean, you can't really get any more simple than that. And the bounty hunters that kind of prowl the wasteland, they're all swordsmen because bullets are so ultra rare and hard to come by that it isn't practical to even carry a gun. But they make swords out of anything and all sorts of different types and styles and stuff like that. But it was an interesting movie for him to come right on the heels of Dirty Dancing. I think that if you're looking for a cool twist on this, where you're going to get much better swordplay, the Book of Eli did a much better job. Even though some of the concepts in the Book of Eli are a little off, but the overall concept is very, very sound as far as like the swordplay and stuff like that, because it was the Denzel Washington had the Inosanto Academy out of Los Angeles choreograph the fight scenes, and they're very legitimate in their the tracing of their lineage of Filipino martial arts and the use of a machete all the way back to the Philippines and to the Bolo brigades of World War II. So the swordplay in that far exceeds Steel Dawn, but for like campiness and you can't be near me, I attract violence. That's you can't do better than Steel Dawn.
Steel Dawn is, in my opinion, maybe the best example of a whole run of terrible movies largely inspired by Road Warrior, right? You've got the Bronx Warriors and 2020 Texas Gladiators and Warriors of the Wasteland and After the Fall of New York, just a whole bunch of awful
Don't even forget. I was going to say, don't forget the micro apocalypse of Escape from New York.
Yep, which also had Escape from the Bronx as a spinoff.
Right.
So I think Escape from New York is a different class of movie, honestly, because for one thing, it's arguably not post-apocalyptic, even though New York is clearly post-apocalyptic because they've turned it into a prison. The movie itself is more dystopian. But there was just these whole run of terrible movies that were people running around in leather and sportswear and swinging swords and riding motorcycles.
Weird Science.
Yep, Weird Science. And I mean, how do we forget Thundar the Barbarian too in that?
So Thundar the Barbarian is a whole different category. And it's not a movie, it's an animated television series. Which makes it really interesting because it offered us a post-apocalyptic setting that was, I don't know if appropriate's the right word, but geared for 11 and 12 and 13-year-olds. And I have always thought it is as close to Gamma World, the animated series, as we're ever going to get. And it is a very wahoo post-apocalypse where not only are there giant ships sitting in deserts and the moon is broken, and there are mutants, but also there's super science and sorcery. They explicitly have Okay, here we go.
Thundar the Barbarian.
I just want this guy's voice.
It's a great show.
From out of space comes a runaway planet, hurtling between the Earth and the Moon, unleashing cosmic destruction. Man's civilization is cast in ruin. 2,000 years later, Earth is reborn. A strange new world rises from the old. A world of savagery, super science, and sorcery. But one man bursts his bonds to fight for justice. With his companions, Oofla the Mock and Princess Ariel, he pits his strength, his courage, and his fabulous sun's sword against the forces of evil. He is Thundar the Barbarian.
Yeah, I love that series.
I bought the DVD set for my roommate because he was a big fan of Johnny Quest. He had never seen Thundar, and so he opens this package up on his birthday. He's like, "What the hell is this?" And I was like, "Oh, trust me, you're gonna love this."
You guys
and
know
now he's a big Thundar fan.
Jack Kirby did the character designs for that show.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
Of course, you guys know that. Yeah.
And if you guys are into gaming, a friend of Hazard Studios, Reed Sanfilippo, did Under a Broken Moon for Dungeon Crawl Classics, and did a lot of fun, a lot of good stuff on there.
Yeah, I guess when we're talking about, like Owen already said, that's probably the closest we get to Gamma World as a media property. So, all right, cool stuff. All right, so guys, let's put to a vote. What do we have next? Zardoz or Nausicaa of the Valley of Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind? Which one?
I
do we
vote
want?
Nausicaa.
Yeah, let's keep with the animated theme we just hit.
All right, cool. Yeah, I wasn't planning on showing that, but I have a new rule on the podcast. Whenever someone talks about something for longer than 10 seconds, I have to go ahead and show it because.
Oh, really?
Well,
here we go.
Let me tell you about a show called Transformers.
I'm loving the soundtrack. What is this?
It's a future world on the verge of destruction.
Ruled by prehistoric omnis.
人類は残り少ない資源を争って戦い合い、
Have I gotten the flavor?
そのためにオウムの
I think you're good.
している。
There's also a big war that's happening.
Okay, sorry. Usually, I love stuff from that studio, but that soundtrack was killing me. Is that 1970s Japanese pop?
Well, I mean, it's 1984. And here's the thing: whether Nausicaa: The Valley of the Wind is a Studio Ghibli film or not is a point of contention among some fans because Studio Ghibli was founded as a result of the success of that movie. Mm-hmm. So it's all the same people doing all the same thing, but it actually was not officially Studio Ghibli when it was originally released, but then they later claimed it, and so most Americans run into it as a Studio Ghibli film.
Okay, cool. So what do you guys like
about
the
music? Is not really representative of the music in the movie, as I recall it either.
No,
but
the movie has more orchestral music in it.
Okay, that is good to hear. So what do you guys like that movie? Sell me on it.
So it's a movie set in the post-apocalypse that isn't about how hard it is to live in the post-apocalypse. So there's an incredibly dangerous toxic forest, and there are giant mutated creatures, and there are ancient weapons of the old world that destroyed the old world that we can't trust. But the movie is about what it takes to be a leader and what it takes to trust yourself and why war is a bad thing. Those are the themes of the movie, and they are set against this post-apocalyptic backdrop.
Okay, cool. All right, so next up, we put it off as long as we can. We can no longer avoid it. Guard your loins for Zardoz. Chris, I'm going to make you explain this while I set it up.
Oh, Lord.
Well, there was a glorious grand age in the 1970s where brilliant filmmakers could walk into major studios, get millions of dollars, and shoot whatever the hell they wanted. And out of that, we got some of the greatest films ever made, and we also got some of the worst films ever made. But the thing is, 70s films are bad in their own unique, compelling way. You know, it's and I think no film may epitomize that. Yes, I would even put it over Heaven's Gate than Zardoz.
And here we go.
Yeah.
Looks like reverse Star Wars.
Zardoz speaks to you, his chosen ones. The gun is good.
God.
Go forth and kill.
So there might have been some drugs ingested.
I hope so.
My name is Zed. Zardoz. I'm an exterminator.
Oh god, this music.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have never seen Zardoz ever, and I intend to continue doing so.
Okay.
That is a rough day at the office.
So they pulled up, So they pulled up a dump truck of money to Sean Connery's house, and they just poured it on the yard. Wow.
So, Chris, if someone wants to experience the experience that is Zardoz, should they just go straight for the MSTK 3000 version, or is that one even those guys decide to skip?
They've never mistied that film, and it would be a really tough film to do because it's very long, especially by 70s movie standards. And one of the best nights I've ever had at the movies is, as I often do, I put out an open call. Hey, who'd like to join in with me and go to Alamo Drafthouse and see this? The night they ran Zardoz, biggest movie turnout I've ever had. I had my good friend Hal Mangold came with me. One of my other friends brought his family along. So we were half the people in the theater, and at the end we felt like the movie had beaten us physically, but even we had to acknowledge, amongst all the bombast and things that don't work, there's a good film in there struggling to get out.
I don't believe you.
That's fine.
So, here's the thing about Zardoz. There are some themes in Zardoz that are very, very, very strong. There are some ideas about how you can use propaganda to manipulate a society, how the needs of one group may well pit them against the needs of another group, and how a society that puts aside some aspect of human nature may suffer even if what they're putting aside are considered to be negative aspects. All of that stuff is good stuff. In my opinion, that's a lot like saying, hey, here's a strawberry cake with a bunch of liver in it. You can do some delicious things with liver. You can do some delicious things with a strawberry cake. I'm not prepared to say that putting them together means that there was a good cake in there somewhere. But there are lessons to be learned and things to be taken away from that movie that I think make it worth seeing and even analyzing as a fan of science fiction and post-apocalyptic fiction.
I don't have much to say after watching those 2 minutes of Zardoz. Perhaps this is a good time for a segue. Hey, Owen, tell us about GammaFinder.
So I was originally asked to come on this podcast if I wanted to talk about GammaFinder, and then that being such a short topic, we added all the other post-apocalyptic stuff that people might actually care about. GammaFinder is something I'm currently doing on my blog, owenkcstevens.com, which is I call it a setting hack for Starfinder. It was originally one post where I said, hey, what would we have to do to run a 3 or 4 session Starfinder role-playing game campaign that felt like a post-apocalyptic campaign of the Thunder of the Barbarian, or obviously I'm wearing my inspirations on my sleeve by calling it GammaFinder. But I wrote a few posts and people really seem to dig them. And I think I'm up to 20 or 30 posts now, and I've been doing things like talking about the ancient titans that stand around in the background and influence their world just by being there, which actually is something of a nod to Nausicaa, and mutant abilities and how you can have various specific and growing broader mutant powers in Starfinder characters and rules for all of that. So it's been surprisingly popular. I've created an index page, and honestly, it's likely to become an RPG supplement, or I suppose conceivably even a full mini game at some point. But that's what it is. It's supported by the people at my Patreon, and it's gotten the biggest response to anything I've ever done on my blog to date.
Oh, all right, cool. So I know these blog things are always kind of in development. Do you have thoughts about when this will be available for people to buy, or is this kind of, if you dig it, go to my Patreon and you'll see more?
Right now, if you dig it, go to my Patreon and you'll see more. And like today, for my patrons, I took all of the mutant powers I'd put together and compiled them into one post just for my patrons. There's no new content for them, but it's in one place instead of spread out all over the place. And then the index I update every time I do a new article, so you can read through it. You can see what is the content I've come up with so far. Honestly, I don't even know how many words this thing is yet, but I would guess it's going to be a solid month and a half more writing before I end up going through a development pass. It might be available this fall as a thing once I decide what that thing is going to be.
All right, cool. And we'll have the link to your Patreon and to the index here in the show notes. People can check that out at their leisure. And while we have now segued to the promotional portion of the show, we would be amiss if we didn't talk about the big mountain of gaming stuff that you and various other publishers, are selling now on drive-thru. The Fat Right Genius Adventures Mega Bundle. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we've actually started calling it the Fat Right Adventure Genius Bundle, just because that way we can say go frag yourself. It's 160 PDFs from 4 different companies. Fat Goblin, there they are. Adventure Week Games, Fat Goblin Games, Rite Publishing, and Rogue Genius Games. We each put in 40 different PDFs. We're selling it for $35, but it's on drive-thru, so you get credit. If you've bought half of those things from us already, then you only have to pay half as much. And it's a bunch of things for Pathfinder First Edition, Pathfinder or Starfinder 5th Edition. There's some system agnostic stuff. We've got some maps, and we've got some print and fold terrain. And it's just some of the best things that these 4 companies all put together so that we can offer you a large collection. And even if you're a fan of any one or any 2 of these companies, there ought to be stuff in there that you don't have that is of interest to you. So that allows the 4 companies to all advertise it together. And sort of if you've already bought everything of mine, if I advertise it, then the people at Rite and Adventure a Week can get the benefit. If you're already a fan of everything that Adventure a Week's done, then maybe the Rite Publishing and the Fat Goblin stuff is for you.
All right, cool. We'll have that link in the show notes as well, but you can just do a search on Fat Right Genius Adventures Mega Bundle, and it'll come up on DTRPG, because I'm fairly certain that's the only product with that kind of name. So
I do also want to do a shout out and a thanks that the people at drive-thru were so kind as to work with us on getting a banner together and putting it in their front page banner rotation and helping us, because part of the point of this is that, I mean, for obvious reasons, and we all get it, sales of gaming material is down for a lot of small companies at the moment, and people that have this as their primary source of income are hurting. People for whom this is a side gig might suddenly find themselves without their other sources of income. So the idea was to try and give people who might be in isolation a ton of material to read through and ideas for games you can play, maybe get online and do them with virtual tabletops, and get some income for our backers who get royalties from this, and the people running these companies as well.
Sweet. And I want to apologize to all our viewers, because holy shit, we got a bunch of comments on YouTube, and I was looking in another window. So Yogi Downey, James O'Keefe, Jesus Christ, Amen, various other guys, thanks for commenting. Just saw your notes there. And yeah, Charlton Heston's Omega Man will be a good addition to that list, come to think of it. So thanks for that, Yogi Downey. Cool. Hey, pimping ain't easy. But Craig, you got to tell us all about Capers Offworld.
Well, Capers Offworld is the third and final supplement for the Capers game line, which is basically takes the 1920s Prohibition gangsters and cops with superpowers and like what if Earthlings also discovered spaceflight, so it becomes kind of space cops and rocket robbers. So this is a supplement for that. Looks like it's gonna be 96 pages, which is longer than the previous 2 supplements, so it's a pretty good chunk, pretty good sized book. And everything in Capers, obviously the core game is perfectly usable with all of this. So this is actually kind of more, maybe the more robust of the supplements, because it is set in the 20s. So everything in Capers is kind of part of that world as well. That's just the Earthbound stuff. This is all the stuff out in space.
Cool.
So this wraps up on Thursday, the 23rd of April. It's like right now it's just shy of a stretch goal. It's going to put a little more content and kind of fatten the book out to that 96 pages, and then it's just the run to the finish line. And I just got the colors for the 2-page comic in the middle from the artist like an hour ago. So I'm down to the last few pieces that have to get put into the book. It's going to turn over pretty quickly.
Sweet. It seems like the dynamic of Capers, as you say, is kind of cops and robbers. I guess it wouldn't lend itself too much like Capers After the Bomb, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to have Earth blow up and just take it all into space, you can do that too. Just leave Chicago and Atlantic City and New York City behind. You could make this apocalyptic pretty easily.
All right, cool. We'll have that in our show notes too. But if you want that, you should probably jump on it fast, because he's got about 3 days left in that campaign. So that's Capers Offworld Kickstarter right now, ladies and gentlemen. So we're getting close to the top of the hour. I must return to the bidding of my soulless paymasters. Any closing thoughts before we wrap things up, folks?
There's two things I want to mention to fans of Post-Apocalyptica that we didn't get to that I'm a fan of, so I want to share in case they are too. And those are the combined concepts of the television show Arc 2, that's Arc with a K, and Damnation Alley, both of which fall into the armored RV in the post-apocalypse subgenre. I'm a big fan of it. Arc 2 is a live-action children's Saturday morning television show. I'm not saying it's great, but it's got a lot of stuff you can steal from it. And Damnation Alley is based on a much better book, but the vehicle from it is super cool.
You don't see the trailer?
Oh, yeah. I love the thing. I love the Landmaster, which is the vehicle from Damnation Alley.
This is one of those movies that looks like it's Chris Christopherson, but it's not actually Chris Christopherson.
Multiple warhead strike confirmed. Retaliatory strike on advisement.
Hostile missiles heading.
Great adventures. Desolate. Barren.
There it is.
And these 5 survivors may be the only humans.
Oh, God, is that Carl
Jan
Weathers?
Michael Vincent.
Jan Michael Vincent.
Into the unknown.
But the star of the movie is that vehicle.
Yeah, the vehicles are amazing, especially in the fact that they exist. They made those, and they work exactly how they do in the movie.
Safely through the hell that lies ahead.
And we haven't tested them against Red Lightning, but they built an actual working vehicle.
Yeah, they have the kitchens inside, full with ovens and coffee makers and everything.
I kind of want to see this now.
They must endure.
Oh, if you haven't seen it, you should.
The nightmare of what we once knew.
It
There's
seems
this
like
great giant scorpion scene at the very beginning.
Yep.
Journey through.
I feel like I've seen this like 3 o'clock in the morning on broadcast television sometime back in the 80s, but
that seems really likely.
Dominic Sander, Paul Winfield, Jackie Earl Haley.
I was sure that was Carl Weathers.
Wow. That's a cast.
I was read an interview with Paul Winston there, and they brought up the name of this movie, and he just laughed and said, "You know, some days you're getting an Academy Award nomination, and others you're getting eaten by giant cockroaches."
Magic of sound 360.
Yep.
More than a motion picture, an adventure you'll never forget.
More than a motion picture.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's a motion picture, and it's a car that was then repurposed for low-rent science fiction and weird. And they used it as a robotic paper boy in a sitcom in the late 90s or early aughts, right? That vehicle has been kicking around forever.
You know, this whole idea of George Papard leading a bunch of elite military people in a van, I think you could make something out of that.
All we have to do is take some tinfoil and hard weld it on, and it'll be bulletproof.
In the the Malibu Comics Ultraverse, the character Hardcase eventually bought one of those vehicles and used it in his travels across the United States to save people.
You know, YouTube, after I stopped sharing that with you guys, I started auto-playing this video called Dean Jeffries Discuss the Landmaster, constructed for Damnation Alley. And it's 10 minutes of that guy talking about that truck. So
that truck is popular. And then there's a similar but different vehicle from the television series Arc 2. A lot of people think it's the same thing recovered, but they are, in fact, unrelated vehicles.
Was this during the van craze of the late 70s that this happened?
It is in its way a vansploitation film.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a good place to end things. So, hey, guys, thank you so much for coming out. It's always a pleasure having all of you on. And any final closing thoughts before we get out of here?
Well, this has been my first time on in a while, so I just I'm sorry if this has already been covered, but just say, hey, everybody, stay safe, take care. Even though you're not physically here with us, we wouldn't be anything if we didn't have you, awesome listeners, and I hope that we've made your isolation at least a little brighter. And take care, stay safe.
Oh, that's a good way to close things, Chris. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that. And until next time on the Banff Podcast. Oh, hey, Thursday, we're playing that game about robots who are also people. Jacob and Walt will be joining us again for that, 2 p.m. Mountain. It's our lunchtime beat-em-ups because it's short role-playing to alleviate your quarantine tedium. It's always a lot of fun. Check us out, and we'll see you next time. Oh, there's Jacob with the Transformer.
Bye, folks.